The sun was sinking low over the outskirts of the city, spilling long shadows across forgotten alleys and empty lots. It was one of those places people pretended didn't exist, a stretch of broken glass, rusted cans, and silence. The air smelled of metal and smoke, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Officer Ethan Cole had driven these roads for years, the kind of streets where dreams went to die, where the city's forgotten souls lived in the cracks no one cared to fix. But that evening, something in the air felt different. The kind of different that made his instincts tighten, the kind that told a man like him that someone, needed help. His radio buzzed with static, a faint hiss that only made the emptiness louder. Then he heard it, so soft it could have been the wind, but haunting enough to make him stop. A sound between a whimper and a cry. Not loud, not clear, but real enough to make his heart stutter. If you believe kindness and second chances can still change a life, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Every click helps stories like this one reach hearts that still care. Ethan stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under his boots. The dying sunlight cast the world in shades of copper and ash. He scanned the wasteland behind an old warehouse, the smell of rotten burned plastic crawling into his lungs. For a long minute, he saw nothing, just heaps of trash, old rags, and the hollow carcass of what used to be a home. Then, in the corner of his eye, a flicker of movement. Something small, fragile, barely there. His pulse quickened as he approached, the air growing heavier with each step. Beneath a torn blanket, half buried in garbage, lay a little girl. Her skin was paper-thin, her limbs no thicker than sticks. Her tangled hair clung to her face, gray with dust and neglect. For a terrible moment, Ethan thought she was gone. Then he saw it, the faintest rise and fall of her chest. That single, fragile breath hit him like a thunderclap. He dropped to his knees, his breath catching in his throat. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her filthy pink dress barely clung to her body, her lips cracked, her fingers twitching weakly as if reaching for something long lost. He whispered words she couldn't hear, words even he didn't understand, hoping she'd feel the gentleness in his tone. Then her eyes flickered open, ghostly blue, clouded with exhaustion. And in that single look, he saw something he'd never forgotten, fear, yes, but also the tiniest spark of life still clinging on. Ethan fumbled for his radio, shouting for an ambulance, his voice trembling with urgency. Child found alive. Severe distress. Need medical support immediately. As he waited, his gaze drifted to a small object beside her, a stuffed bear, torn and burned on one side. He picked it up carefully, brushing off the dirt. A name was stitched into the ear in faded thread, for Ivy, love, Mom. Beneath it, half hidden in the grime, was a tiny photograph. A smiling woman and a bright-eyed little girl stood in front of a house that looked nothing like this place. The contrast was unbearable. Whoever this child was, she hadn't always lived in darkness. Something had happened. Something cruel enough to strip her world down to ashes. When the ambulance finally arrived, the medics worked fast, moving with the silent intensity of people who'd seen too much but still cared. Ethan held the girl's tiny hand as they lifted her onto the stretcher. "You're safe now, sweetheart," he whispered. "You're safe." But even as the sirens wailed away into the night, his heart refused to calm. He couldn't stop thinking about that name. Ivy. That night, he didn't go home. He sat in the hospital corridor outside the pediatric ICU, the sterile lights humming above him, staring through the glass where Ivy lay connected to tubes and monitors. Hours passed. The nurse eventually told him she was stable but severely malnourished. She had been surviving on rainwater and scraps, her tiny body fighting for every heartbeat. Ethan didn't sleep. He couldn't. He went through every missing child report he could find, flipping through faces and names that blurred together. But just before dawn, he found it. Ivy Malone, age 6, missing for nearly 2 years. Her mother, Claire Malone, had vanished the same night, last seen fleeing an abusive home. No trace of either since. Ethan's chest tightened. Somewhere out there, a mother might still be searching for this child. Or worse, she might have given up hope long ago. Days turned into weeks. Ivy's body began to heal. Her cheeks slowly filled out, her eyes gained a faint light again, but her voice, her beautiful, broken voice, barely returned. Sometimes, when she drifted in and out of sleep, she would mumble, "Mommy, don't hit, please." Every word was a knife through Ethan's heart. He'd seen trauma, neglect, cruelty, but this was something deeper. This was what it looked like when a soul had almost forgotten what love felt like. He promised himself he wouldn't let her fade again. Not this time. Not on his watch. One afternoon, as he sat by her bedside reading through old reports again, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was from a nearby women's shelter. "We have a woman here," they said, wandering near the outskirts. "She's injured, confused, and keeps talking about losing her daughter in a fire." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice barely steady. The woman on the line hesitated. "Claire," she whispered. When he arrived at the shelter, the world seemed to hold its breath. The woman sitting in the corner was little more than a shadow of who she'd once been. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted, her face bruised and hollow. But the moment he showed her the photo he'd found beside Ivy, the world changed. Claire's eyes widened, filling with tears that spilled freely down her dirt-streaked cheeks. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the photo to her chest, sobbing from somewhere deep inside her soul. "She's alive," she gasped between tears. "My baby's alive." Ethan felt his throat tighten as he nodded. For a long time, they just cried, two people bound not by blood, but by loss, hope, and the quiet miracle of a second chance. When the day of the reunion came, the hospital felt sacred. Nurses gathered silently at the doorway, unable to look away. Ivy sat up in bed, fragile but alert, her little fingers wrapped around that same worn teddy bear. The door creaked open, and Claire stepped inside. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The room was still. Then, Ivy's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy." The word carried every ounce of memory, pain, and longing she'd ever known. Claire fell to her knees, tears streaming, pulling her daughter into her arms. She held her like she was holding the last piece of her soul, afraid that if she let go, the world would end. "I've got you, baby," she whispered into Ivy's hair. "Mommy's here." The nurses couldn't hold back their tears. Even Ethan had to step into the hallway, covering his face with his hand as silent sobs escaped him. For years, he had seen pain, cruelty, and despair. But in that moment, he remembered why he wore the badge: to protect what was good, to fight for the forgotten, to keep hope alive when the world turned its back. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Let's remind the world that compassion still exists, that second chances are real, and that one act of care can rewrite a life forever. As Ethan left the hospital that evening, the sun was sinking again, the sky burning orange just like the night he'd found her. But this time, the air carried something different, not silence, but laughter. Soft, joyful, and alive. He paused outside Ivy's room, smiling through tears as he heard her giggle for the first time. That sound would stay with him for the rest of his life.